Hello, welcome to the TheHagwon's June 2025 SAT Test Administration Recap. We're back.
We're back.
It's been a while.
It's been a couple months.
Well, today we're going to talk about what happened on the June SAT, the trends, the patterns we saw, some of the things that have been a little bit different since the most recent test administrations. Before we get into that, and also how you might want to retake the test and some plans during the summer to get to that August and September test administration, we want to talk to you about the TheHagwon question bank.
Yes.
Just released. It's free. It's open. It's you can find the link over here. You can find it in the description. There's going to be big block letters here. TheHagwon.com/question bank just to practice. We have questions from math, reading, writing. You can choose specific question types, difficulties of all ranges. If you don't know what kind of question types, you can just press shuffle and you can have a good time drilling yourself, getting to know the SAT questions really intimately. You have anything else about it?
I mean, it's a really big resource. It's a lot of different questions across all of the question types. They don't overlap with any of the Blue Book questions, any of the Khan Academy questions. So if you're really looking for a free resource to kind of spend time, especially over summer, to help keep your game up for SAT in general, and you need something that you can use immediately, hit the ground running now, we would love if you wanted to try out our question bank. We also have a Discord channel where you can come ask questions for any of the things you see on the question bank. There are a lot of other fun features that you can use that will help you with test day. All you have to do is make an account. The access to the entire question is absolutely free for everyone. And like Joon said, if you want to check it out, everything will be linked down below. So yeah, come over, give it a go. It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
So the reading section. Of course, always a big discrepancy between the upper module 2 and then module 1. That always seems to happen. But it seems like nowadays the questions are getting longer. Not that there's more of them, but that there is more words per passage, per answer choice, and it's bogging down students.
Right. So this is something that we've been talking about since late 2024. We've noticed this pattern a lot, which is College Board can't really change the number of questions or the question types you see on an upper module. So there's two ways that they're going to make things more difficult for you. One of the ways they do that is just making every question longer. So you're going to see passages that are a lot longer, that are going to be maybe up to 12 lines even. So those are very dense and hard to kind of get through passages you'll see. And on top of that, they're going to start writing answer choices that are really long as well. So a lot of the more difficult and even some of the simpler question types, we've been seeing answer choices that are 3 to 4 lines long. So if you have an answer choice that's 4 lines long, you got 4 answer choices like that. That's 16 lines of reading in the answer choices alone. So if you see a passage like that, regardless of the difficulty of the passage itself, the difficulty of the question type, it's just going to eat up a lot of your time to sit and get through that question. So that's one way that College Board makes a module 2, and especially in an upper module 2, more difficult for students. And the second way that we've been seeing them do a little bit more and more, and especially we saw on the June SAT, is that they're going to start changing out the rhetorical synthesis or the research questions. Those are the questions that start with, student took some notes, or we have some certain notes on a topic, and they give you a list of bullet points. Those are the rhetorical synthesis questions. And the easier writing questions are going to get switched out for reading questions. And the reason for that is, like I just said, reading questions are just a lot longer. So even if they're not more difficult, they're going to take you more time to solve. And so when they start inundating you with questions that just take up more time, you're going to have less wiggle room and less time to really spend and reread on the actual difficult reading questions, the question 14, 15, 16s that we see that are the really high level difficulty inference questions. You're not going to be able to read answer choices maybe 2 or 3 times if all of the other questions are also asking for so much of your time. So that's one of the biggest patterns we've noticed on the Module 2 for international and US tests in June.
Now, we can't give away all of our secrets, but in the way that you solve these questions maybe a little more efficiently, I remember you talking a lot about a skimming.
Exactly. So when SAT gets longer, the best way to deal with it is to get really good at skimming versus reading. Now, when I talk about skimming versus reading, and there's a space and a time to talk about this much more in depth. But the point of it is to figure out, depending on the question type, there's a certain type of information that they're asking you to look for. What I mean by that is if you're reading to solve a detail question versus you're reading to solve an inference question, the kind of content and information you should be looking for in a passage is going to be wildly different. I used this analogy in a previous React video, but you don't want to drive through a reading passage on the SAT blind. You don't want to just read line by line, wait and get hit in the face with the information you need to solve the test. You have to read through it with intention, knowing, hey, I know that this is a question that's asking me about a detail, so I know it's going to be within one sentence and it has to be about this point. So I need to skim the passage until I see some of these buzzwords and read around there, and not get so caught up in trying to understand every single line of the passage. And it goes for all of the different question types, especially the evidence questions, the textual and quantitative evidence questions, as well as the inference questions, which are a lot more dense. Just to kind of put in a slight aside here is one of the questions we've been seeing a lot, if you've taken the Joon test, the questions about the birds' range of vision and the questions with kind of the dogs and the pupils of dogs. The reason those questions are difficult is not because they're asking content that is so high level. It's because they're throwing a lot of different factors into a single passage, right? They're throwing in different factors like types of dogs, the personality of dogs, the pupils of dogs, and then the reaction of people. So that's a lot of different factors around one experiment in a passage. And so you're getting confused which is the thing that you need to keep track of. Well, the way we can get around that is to not get bogged down and read every single detail in that passage. Instead, you want to focus on those factors that are the most intimately and directly related to the conclusion or the main hypothesis or the main claim of the people in that passage. And to do that, I know it's not intuitive, but you need to skim, not read the whole passage. Yeah, so that's my little spiel on how to get around that.
Well, the other thing that students had a lot of trouble with, and we see this every single test administration, maybe specifically this one a little bit more, vocabulary.
Vocabulary.
Especially Module 2.
Yes.
And especially some of those words that seem archaic, that seem anachronistic.
Right. I understand the frustration. A lot of you, after you walk out of the test center, you're going to feel like, I'd never seen these words before. Do we even use those words? Like, what do they even mean? Why did they show up? And there's also a lot of frustration because there's a big discrepancy between the vocab that we're seeing on the Blue Book practice test versus that you can actually see on test day. They're a lot more difficult, especially if you're getting the upper module 2, which is, you should be really excited when you open upper module 2, your module 2, and those first 3 questions are super difficult vocab questions. Part of you should be very relieved. You did quite well on module 1. You're on the upper module, so you're doing well, but it is really frustrating to open that module with insane words you feel like you've never seen before and had never studied before. And I know I talk about this when we answer questions on how to study for reading in general. Vocab is something that I'm always stressing, and the response I get from students pretty regularly is that vocab takes up a lot of time and you don't know what you're going to see on test day. Which is true. And I understand why students don't spend as much time studying for vocab because of that. But another thing I can tell you is that vocab or words in context question are one of the only question types that I can say you will, reliably see at least 6 questions of, regardless of which test you sit, regardless of what module you get. So regardless of whether you're international or taking it in the US, whatever month you're taking it in, whatever year you're taking it in, and whether you get upper or lower module for module 2, I can tell you, you will see at least 6 vocab questions. And so if one reading section is 27 questions, that's a pretty big chunk of your reading section. So it does go a long way to start studying for vocab now if you're going to continue to take the SAT. And that's something we would recommend. And we have Vocability, which is our entirely free data bank of flashcards, Quizlet sets, and words in context practice questions. So not only do we give you an entire vocab list of tried and true and tested vocab questions, I would say 99% of the ones we've seen come up on Joon are already part of our Vocability set. Not only will you get flashcards and Quizlet set for those so you can study them anywhere, we already have a built-in question bank specifically for Vocability, meaning you can try out super upper level difficulty words and context questions multiple times before testing. And Vocability is also entirely free. You just need to make an account and you get full access to all of the components of our vocab curriculum. So, while we're here, it's beginning of summer, that's what I would urge students to do if they really want to get prepped for fall, because you will see difficult vocab words in August. You will see them in September and every test after this.
Making an account also very simple. Just click the Google button.
Yeah.
You have a Google account.
You sign in with your Gmail account. It'll take 5 seconds.
Maybe in the same way that if you look up, how to improve English or reading, writing rapidly, people always talk about learn grammar.
Right.
That's been like the big guiding light.
Yes.
We might even need to bring in now, just start vocab early.
Yeah. If you're telling me I'm taking SAT in 2 weeks and I need to do something to get a reliably higher score, you're absolutely right. I would say you got to get your writing and your grammar down. If you can give me a little more time than that, if you can give me like a month or even 6 weeks.
Which you have for the next test administration in August.
You have 2 months until the next sitting of SAT. I would say you should start with vocab now and try to get through as many words. Because you're right, you don't know what you're going to see, but you will see difficult words, 100% probability.
Module 2 math also seemed very difficult, as it does in every test administration.
Yes.
But it seemed like an issue that students start running into is not that the questions are unsolvable, not that they're completely foreign in form or difficulty, but it's the time management.
Yeah, it is time management. And here we've talked about this before, but if you go on the College Board website, they have a list of topics that they test in math. They do not test outside of that content area. You're not going to walk into a test center and suddenly see calculus questions on the SAT. It's just not part of the curriculum that they test. But they have to come up with new ways to ask those same content questions. And they're not going to ask it in the exact same way you've already seen on Blue Book practice tests because you've already tried those questions. It's the same content and it's the same knowledge, but they're going to give it to you in a way that's just going to take you a little longer to figure out what they're asking you to do and take you a little more time to get centered on either using Desmos or kind of setting yourself up with formulas. And in that sense, time management is quite difficult on Module 2. And especially what we've noticed is usually in math, we would say the most difficult questions were between questions 19 and 22. So that the very end 4 questions. I think what we're seeing is they're not giving those super high level difficulty of questions throughout the entire module 2, but they're giving the mid-high level difficulty of questions from maybe question 12 to question 18. So those questions are getting slightly longer, slightly more difficult to read through, and they're also putting in a lot of geometry questions in that portion of the test, which just makes things a lot, it just takes them a lot longer time.
God forbid one of them is a complicated word problem.
Or exactly. Complicated word problem with shapes or diagrams.
Oh, no.
That's a free response question. Those are the killers. So you're going to see a little more of those. And that's the reason students are having trouble pacing themselves on this test. Now, there's a couple ways to go through that. And one is if you feel yourself get too bogged down on a question and you're still pretty early on in the module, let's say you're around question 12 or 13, I would say if it's taking you more than a minute to kind of start attacking the question and getting through it, you need to stop, drop your pencil and move on and go to the next question. There are a lot of other things behind that you might be able to solve a little quicker, especially if you're better with using Desmos. So try to at least get through the test once. This is why it's really helpful for you to practice your full-length tests with a platform that has all of the functions that you would see on test day, like flagging questions and being able to eliminate answers, which you are able to do on the TheHagwon's full-length practice test. But this is why we ask you to, really practice with different features on the platform, on the Bluebook platform itself as well. So try to get through the entire module once and then come back to the questions that are really asking for a lot of your time. So that's what you can do on test day. The second thing is, and it will always be true, which is the really, really difficult SAT questions are usually geometry questions. They're geometry and trig questions. And the reason for that is those are the question types that are really easy for College Board to take a rather simple concept or a simple kind of math fact and upgrade it so that it's a little more difficult to get around or get through. And so it's really easy for College Board to elevate those questions, which is why you'll see a lot of them.
I'm thinking like just a triangle versus a triangle inside a circle.
Exactly.
Or instead of just 2 lines, you have 6 lines.
Exactly. We would see on like Bluebook practices, you'll see a question that has like 2 parallel lines and 1 intersecting line. On test day, you might see something with like a group of 4 to 5, maybe even 6 lines. And everything just gets a little more complicated. It's the same idea, and you can solve it in the same way. If you can solve the Bluebook questions, you can solve the ones you see on test day, but they're just a little more difficult and a little more convoluted. It just takes more time for you to get through. And that's the difficulty of these questions. Now, what does that mean? Because a lot of students are saying, well, I did all the Bluebook practice questions, and if the actual test day questions are so much harder, what do I need to do? Where should I go? Obviously, do the Bluebook questions, do the Khan Academy questions. We also have our free question main come on there to try out the more difficult math questions on there as well. But the great resource that you already have and you can access pretty easily is your geometry textbooks at school. So make sure if your goal is to score, I would say 760 or higher on the math section, go back to your geometry and trig textbooks and make sure you can solve those chapter review questions in your textbook. If you're good with that level of difficulty of math, you should be absolutely fine on test day. Remember that College Board is really not testing outside that level of difficulty. So you should be, if you're very comfortable with questions that you would see in a classroom setting at school, you should be absolutely set for test day. So don't just rely on Bluebook practice questions. You already have a lot of resources at your fingertips. You can definitely get the score you need using them.
So score release for the June SAT will be around the 20th Eastern time morning?
June 20th.
Yeah, it's usually a cascading thing. It's not all at one time.
Yes, it'll be your Friday.
Yeah. But after that, you get your score. Hopefully it's good. But if it's not, or you think you can do better, retaking, I think a lot of questions after June is, how do I prepare for the next test? And then also, which test should I take? There's like this big cluster in fall. And, do I want to give myself 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? But then school starts, a lot of questions. How would you approach it?
Right. So the good news is that we have a lot of tests in fall. So we have tests in August, September, October, November, and December. So pretty much starting late August, you have an SAT every month, which means you don't necessarily have to take it in a certain month. Now, there are some certain students, maybe you are a rising senior and you have to send in SAT scores this fall. I would take one of the tests before October, including October. You could take August, September, October, and still send in your scores for regular decision. So, if you are in that boat, that's something to think about. Any other student, you should not feel forced to take August. Now, if you can start now, starting in June, and you give yourself the 2 months to really apply yourself and study, absolutely, you should get prepared for August. Starting for 2 months, you really don't need to do any more than that if you really are sitting down, buckling down, and getting through the work. If that's not the case, a lot of students have a lot of other extracurriculars to do over summer. Maybe you're doing camp, you're doing other volunteering stuff. Definitely don't feel pressured to take August. September and October are also wonderful test dates. November and December are a lot more difficult because you will have responsibilities at school. So I don't recommend people to in the summer set their goal to take November or December. November or December you should take if you sat October and for whatever reason you weren't able to perform at the ability you can. Like, so let's say you had like nerves issues, you had technical errors, which are happening. We are seeing some of those happen.
Cancellations. You're sick.
Right, you're sick. There's some issue at the test center.
Big mechanical clickety keyboard person next to you.
Something really annoying happened on test day. It happens. So if that happens, if you're taking September, October, and that happens, November, December is there for backup, but don't plan on taking November, December, especially if you're not if you're not having to send a score in this fall. You really shouldn't have to take that. That's scheduling. Now, to talk about what you should actually be studying for. Now, you have a lot of time, which is good and bad, because a lot of times having 2 to 3 months to prepare for a test gets students to feel very comfortable with how much time they have. 3 months is enough time, but it's not a lot of time. So we really gotta start studying now. If I was a student who had never studied for the SAT before, for reading and writing, like I said, I would start with grammar and vocab. Make sure you have those grammar rules down, especially transitions. Memorize your transition words like you're doing vocab. If you're getting those kind of cleared and out of the way early on in the first month, you're going to really set yourself up to focus on just the higher level reading questions in the end of summer, which is a much easier way to study in general. So in the beginning, do grammar rules for your writing questions and all of the vocabulary, and consistently do vocabulary throughout summer. And then I would think that in July and early August is when you should start hitting the higher level reading questions. So make sure you know how to attack the textual quantitative evidence questions and the inference questions and cross-text questions. Those are kind of where you want to spend the bulk of your time preparing for reading. On math, this month in June, if you want to give yourself the 2 weeks to get through all of the algebra and the really kind of more simple, lower classmen kind of class level math. So that's going to be all of your algebra questions, probably your advanced math questions, which is really just quadratics. So algebra and quadratics you want to get out of the way. That way you'll have geometry and trig, which should take you the longest to review, because it's actually a lot of different things. It's a lot of different shapes. It includes lines and angles as well. So you want to make sure to give yourself enough time in July and August to get through all of that. And if you haven't taken any classes that teach it before, you might need a lot of time to get through the content of problem solving and data analysis questions, because those are anything from, different kind of like frequency tables, probabilities. It's also going to include things like exponential increases, exponential decreases. It's going to be a lot of kind of combinations, permutations, things like that. So if you've never taken a class that has taught that content, you might need to learn that from scratch. And Khan Academy actually is a really, really great resource to learn that content. They're going to give you great basic questions to make sure you understand the content that's being tested in that area. They might not reflect the difficulty level of what you see on test day, but you will at least be able to make sure you know the information that that chapter, that topic is asking from you. So that's how I would study throughout summer. I would start beginning with Blue Book, with the College Board Khan Academy question banks, and then I would go on to the TheHagwon question banks to make sure you're understanding each of the different question types and topic areas. Once you're doing and you really quite well with the question bank questions, and you feel very comfortable there, is when I would move on to taking the full length test, to go back to the Blue Book test, go through all of the Blue Book practice tests. Make sure you're actually spending time spending the entire time on the module, you're using all of the tools, you're really prepping yourself for test day. Once you've gotten through all of those practice tests and you're like, okay, well, I'm good with test management, time management, I'm good with the functions, I now know all of the content that's on the Blue Book Blue Book practice test questions, then you're really ready to kind of drill yourself for test day. You're welcome to come onto our website and try out our full-length practice test as well if you need more material to hold you over until August or September. That's kind of the big picture of how I would study starting early June to end of August.
So good luck on score release.
Yes.
We hope that goes well for you. If not, happy studying for August, September.
Yep.
We'll be open to answer questions in
Right.
the comments if you have any regarding June, future testing, service we provide. Again, quick shout out to Question Bank. We've talked about it. It will help you drill, get used to questions. It's free. Just need to make an account. And I think that's it from us.
That is it from us. Yes. Happy summer.
Happy summer. Enjoy yourself.
Enjoy your summer.
Don't study 12 hours a day.
No.
Don't burn yourself out.
You don't have to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But start now.
Yeah.
Bye.